Hey all, so back with another Spotlight with Context, and today we are talking about Bastion, the newest tech villain to stand against all of our mutants. Bastion's a really fun character. If you haven't seen X-Men 97, I recommend you check it out. But we'll go ahead and get straight into the champion attributes here. Survivability of 3.5, Bastion has some extra armor, has some targeted ways to trigger additional regen, but that is about it. Generally does not have net positive regen, and so isn't your usual questing heal battery, more just good at staying alive in certain places. Damage of 4. Bastion's output does require some specific gameplay and then Special 2 into Special 1 to get online, but once you do that, the damage is pretty nuts, and it can be pushed higher if you have time to do a Special 3 first. So very significant damage output here. Ease of use 3.5. The baseline for playing Bastion, even more than normal, is literally to parry opponents and do 5-hit combos. Now, that's not the easiest thing in the world. We're not looking at a 5 here, because one of his primary targets does punish parry, and because once you get rolling at the top of those parry 5-hit combos, you are put on a timer, and so how aggressive you can be and how you can fit things in does start to matter. But for the most part, not that difficult a champion to play. Utility of 4. There's some really solid stuff in here that's aimed especially at mutants, but also combat power rate control is generally a good thing. And anti-hazard shift utility is just generally a good thing, and you have both of those here. Defender strength of 2. His special attacks are a bit annoying. If they hit you, bad things can happen, but there's not a whole lot going on here on defense. So moving on to strengths, like it starts with here, incredible disintegration damage. Bastion has a lot of disintegrates. The combat power rate here is very helpful for controlling the fight, but also these are just big red numbers. Regen, like we said, Bastion has some net negative regen, and for those of you who don't know what I mean when I say net negative regen, I mean that whatever it's responding to is supposed to bring you back up to a little below where you were when damage was taken. It's not meant to let you come into a fight at 20% and leave the fight at 50%. This is often in the form of missing health regen or regenerating a percentage of damage taken. Those are both examples of net negative regen, and that is what Bastion has here. But depending on what you're taking, that can still be really, really powerful. So we'll get into those. And then mutant-oriented utility. Like we talked about, a lot of the things Bastion's looking for in particular are aimed at mutants, and a few of his abilities are just flat out stronger when facing mutants. Weaknesses: as a defender, if you can throw a lot of big Special 2 or Special 3s, you're going to cut through Bastion and remove the small remaining amount of threat he has. And then unique buffs is just generally good, both offense and defense, because Bastion is fully locked out when the opponent has 3 or more unique buffs. So getting into the abilities, Bastion's evolved Sentinel Body provides 100% resistance against bleed and poison effects, and his regen rate cannot be reduced by poison. So as a reminder, this does mean that if he is facing someone who's increasing bleed or poison potency, such as the enhanced bleed node on the map, or the way that Diablo increases the effectiveness of poison, he will take damage there. But in most circumstances, Bastion's not going to take bleed or poison damage, and the regeneration rate penalty that's built into poison is fully turned off. Bastion's regen rate can be reduced by Despair or Petrify or similar effects, so you do have to watch how many debuffs stack up on you in PvP modes, but poison itself is not going to be a problem. That matters quite a bit because of this next bit. When inflicted with a bleed, poison, or crush effect, so remember, effect means either passive or debuff, Bastion gains a 10-second self-repair buff, healing 8% of missing health, or 3% of max health, whichever is greater. So it's important to note that often with missing health regen mechanics, They feel worst when you're playing best, which is fine. That's what balances how incredible they are when you're almost dead, right? But if you are at like 98% health, then a missing health regen can be really, really small. And while that is generally okay, and you will see it again, Bastion specifically kind of puts a floor on his regen by having that max health version there and overriding the missing health one if he's healthy enough. So Bastion can actually go net positive if he is overall very healthy and has enough of these trigger effects coming in. As a last reminder, I know I already said effects is debuffs or passives, but this can also refer to instant effects. So instant bleeds can still grant this self-repair buff, but of course you can only have 2 of them at a time. Additionally, the Sentinel Relic increases the potency of personal disintegration effects by 10%, and this effect is doubled when fighting mutants. Bastion, of course, has links to the Sentinels. This is just a nod to that, since the Sentinel Relic itself wouldn't really do much for his kit. Mechanical Armor Up passive. Bastion starts each fight with an indefinite Armor Up passive, gives a fair amount of armor, and if this ends for any reason, it returns after 14 seconds. While active, Bastion can trigger the Parry Mastery against non-contact attacks, very helpful for some of those mutants, and when Bastion's block is broken due to unblockable or crush, he gains an auto-repair passive for 2 seconds. This is then paused during special attacks. That's pretty huge. While active, Bastion instantly regenerates 85% of all non-Special 3 damage taken, but once this happens, you do have to wait 24 seconds for it to come back. So we've all run into this against various mutants. Obviously, Onslaught activating his Special 1 at exactly the wrong moment while you have Crush Up is the most recent example, but you can go back further than that, run into Storm X, etc. Unblockable specials from mutants are a problem, and Bastion can regen a lot of that damage, right? 85% once you account for the recovery mastery boosting things further, is going to regen almost all of the damage taken during that special. Now, you might have dots lingering after, but still, really powerful ability. And then it is also paused during special attacks. That wording means either champion's special attacks. So if you get hit and they back off and Bastion can immediately throw a special, then you'll hold on to this for 2 seconds after that special in case you take damage on the other side. But more often, this is going to be, okay, the opponent throws their special when it's unblockable or crushes up, and you don't have to worry about how long the special is because you're going to have this auto-repair passive for the whole special and then 2 seconds after. The important thing here is that Bastion's block does have to be broken, right? So going back to those 2 examples of Onslaught and Storm X, if you're facing a Storm X with an unblockable special 2 and you're worried about the dex, then don't dex, right? Because if you go for the dex and mess it up and get clipped by the last hit, you're out of luck. You need to be blocking and have your block actually be broken for this to happen. Same thing with Onslaught. If you are caught on a dashback, this won't save you. And so with Bastion, you just kind of need to get in the habit of blocking the specials that you're really scared of more often. Of course, that cooldown is there, so got to be a little bit intentional with this ability because of how strong it is. Moving on to Techno-Mechanical Virus charges, as you can tell by all these bullets, this is the meat of Bastion's kit, right? Bastion can inflict these in general, but not if the opponent has more than 3 unique buffs. So watch out for fights where that either is a factor immediately or can become a factor, because that's going to be dangerous for you. When either champion strikes with a medium, Bastion inflicts 2 of these. Any light attack inflicts 1, so there's very quick ramp that way. When Bastion performs a well-timed block, you get 2 more. This means that parry 5-hit combo is going to give you 9 total, because you're going to get 2 from each of the mediums, plus 2 from the well-timed block, plus 3 from the 3 lights, for that total of 9. That's an important number to have in the back of your head. When Bastion hits his opponent's block with his first medium or light, he also inflicts 1. This becomes pretty important because against certain opponents where you have to change up your combos or you can't parry as much, you may find yourself getting to a special that you don't want to use if you hit them enough to build more charges. This lets you get around that by ramping a little bit into block. Not always going to be super important, but sometimes it is crucial for pacing out your rotation the way you intend. Now, once you have those charges up, each charge decreases the offensive and defensive ability accuracy of the opponent's personal, non-instant, energy-damaging effects and daunted debuffs by 5% flat, to a maximum of 40 in general or 60% against mutants. So let's break this down a little bit. As a reminder, offensive and defensive ability accuracy refers to specifically when one champion is striking the other, right? And literally the frame where the hit happens. If the debuff happens on a timer or in response to something in that hit event, then this won't catch it. But anything based on striking, such as Onslaught's Neuroshocks, this is going to help with. Now, non-instant means this doesn't catch thorns, and it is restricted to energy-damaging effects. But that's because this is so powerful, right? A flat ability accuracy reduction has almost no counters, right? This happens after other increases. If you were facing, let's use Onslaught again, on enhanced abilities or steady buildup, right? And that 15% chance for neuros was boosted even 100% up to 30, this would still cut through it because that flat 40 or 60% reduction happens after all the other modifications and is just going to zero that out. So there are limiter clauses in here, and you do have to kind of remember the nuances, but this is a very, very strong ability, and as long as you are staying ramped, it's going to feel pretty darn reliable for you. Now, the daunted side of this I would rely on less, because this does technically mean that you can parry Onslaught and have up to a 60% reduced chance to have that daunted go through your block, but that means there's still a 40% chance it will. Bastion doesn't rely on willpower and has regen effects to replace it, so you can get those daunteds on you, especially if it's allowing you to get an important opening to close out the fight, but you are taking a risk that they will happen, and then that means if you get clipped during specials, potentially while your auto repair is on cooldown, you will take more damage. So just a risk to be aware of. It can still absolutely be something that you go for, because remember, Bastion can parry non-contact. I'm focusing on Onslaught here because at the moment he's the only one with daunted debuffs. But if you see that in the future, then that still helps, right? And then whenever a non-instant energy damaging effect fails due to ability accuracy reduction, which means probably this exact reduction the bullet before, inflict a disintegration vulnerability passive for 28 seconds, which is twice as strong against mutants and can stack up to twice. So this means when facing a mutant who's trying to apply these energy damaging effects to you, and you turn them off, you can deal 64% more damage with your disintegrations, which is most of Bastion's damage, which means you're probably just getting a 2/3 damage increase, very nearly. Very strong ability here, so worth understanding in full. As a defender, when Bastion's opponent activates a special attack, so note it doesn't actually have to knock him down, Techno-Mechanical virus charges are removed according to this ratio you see after. The reasoning for this, 5 for Special 1, 12 for Special 2, 24 for Special 3, is to prioritize those big specials, Special 2 and 3, and not just Special 1 spam, if you were curious about that. And then moving on, we already saw a very important consequence of the virus charges, but the other reason that you care about stacking them is that you want to get this Techno-Mechanical Infection. When the opponent's inflicted with 30 of these charges, they get this infection on them. It is indefinite, but removes itself when dropping below 15 charges. So there's a bit of a game to be played there. You can keep stacking charges while infection is active, so you can stave off when you drop below 15. That's nice. There's not a set amount of time that infection is active, and you can stretch it longer. But once you drop below 15, it's gone, and you have to get back up to 30. While infection is active, virus charges begin expiring one at a time every 1.2 seconds. Pause during specials. So every time you go for your specials, you don't have to worry about infection dropping off during them, which is very important because your specials have extra bonuses for infection being up. But whenever a virus charge expires, remaining charges expire faster. Don't worry, this doesn't break the pause or anything like that. The pause is a binary off-on. But this does mean that the longer you've been in infection, the faster these charges are going to tick down, and they go from 1.2 seconds to a very, very short amount of time if you've been able to stretch it, and eventually it just will end. So plan for that. This is not intended to be something that you upkeep for the rest of very long fights. While infection is active, Bastion's opponent has their attack rating decreased by 35%, so this is effectively a giant weakness, even though it's not the weakness type. And they are inflicted with a power reroute passive. This is a brand new ability. It basically steals the opponent's combat power rate while it's being reduced. So digging into the mechanics for a second, what this means is that Bastion is recording what the opponent's combat power rate is at the start of the fight, which is after characters like Kushala or Hulkling, any of those, natively reduce their combat power rate, right? So he's not holding their reduced combat power rate against them at the start, but then he records it after their reduction, and that is the baseline that he's comparing to, right? Once power reroute is active, then any reduction from that recorded baseline is taken as Bastion is doing this, and he steals that much combat power rate for himself. So once you get power reroute active, as long as you have disintegrations up, you're going to be gaining significantly more power. Additionally, built into this new type is a benefit for collar tech, right? So if you are running 5 out of 5 collar tech, then this just has a baseline potency, right? Even if there are no disintegrations on the opponent at all, and even though collar tech reduces their combat power rate before the fight starts and before Bastion measures this, if you have this power reroute passive up, you are still going to gain increased combat power rate because the type just benefits you for running collar tech in the first place. Now, obviously, that's a nice benefit for running collar tech, and we haven't really talked about any disintegrations yet, but let's move right into the heavy attack here, because this will help you understand that you basically should have a disintegration passive up at all times, and that is going to be enough to feed that power reroute. So, the heavy attack, the first hit cannot be evaded, and grants a non-stacking pursuit passive for 10 seconds. So you can use this when the opponent is stun immune. You don't have to worry about that kind of nonsense against Nightcrawler. Against mutants, this passive is 16 seconds instead. The second hit of the heavy inflicts a non-stacking 30% disintegration passive, dealing direct damage for 16 seconds. So this doesn't deal a ton of damage. You spread that 4,000 out over 16 seconds. The ticks are pretty small, but the important part here is that it is a disintegration passive. We'll see that later. And that it has that 30% potency. That 30% is the decreased combat power rate, right? So if you have the power reroute up, you are gaining that 30% for yourself as an increase. Even before you have the power reroute up, this is still helpful because preventing the opponent from throwing as many special attacks lets you be more aggressive and keep your tempo up, which allows you to build more virus charges before you have to worry about them falling off. So next up, the special one. This is a bit backwards because this is actually your cash out. Each beam hit inflicts an instant 10% disintegration. So the 10% part, remember, each of these beam hits is going to grant the opponent 10% less combat power on top of whatever other bonuses are already in place. And then as a defender, this damage is halved and scales with base attack only. But here's the important part. If infection is active, for each personal disintegration effect on the opponent, which will normally be the one from your heavy, inflict another instant disintegration. And then there's also a disintegration with a duration on the special 3. So between the special 3 and the heavy, you can have 2 personal disintegrations up, which would mean that each beam hit inflicts 3 of these disintegrations instead of just 1. So a lot of potential damage here. The special 2 helps you ramp to this because on activation, you get a Fury passive for 28 seconds, which is paused during the opponent's special attacks and can stack twice. Provided Infection is active before you get to this special 2, you get that extra Fury passive, and so you are immediately at max stacks, right? So the way this normally plays out is that you want to build to Infection right around when you get your special 2, or before you get your special 3 at least. You want to throw the special 2, and then making sure you have the disintegrate from the heavy active if it is fallen off. Then you throw the special 1, and it does a bunch of damage. As a reminder, the heavy attack inflicts that disintegration on the second hit, but the heavy attack has 3 hits. So if you get to this place and you're a little bit worried about power management, remember that you can land a heavy, and after that second hit, before the third, cancel into your special attack, and you will have the disintegration up. So that's a really helpful thing for optimizing Bastion. Now, on to the special 3, like we mentioned earlier, the only thing this does is inflict a big, long disintegration debuff. Now, technically, this can stack. I don't think it's worth trying to stack it, because if you have 2 of these disintegrations up, it means you just spent 6 bars of power on them, which means you probably don't have the Furies from the special 2, and you might not have them overlapping for long when you go for the special 1. But this is absolutely worth going for to get one of these big disintegration debuffs up, make sure you have the Furies, and then you can throw a few special 1s in a row with double disintegrations up, with the big Furies, and just do an incredible amount of disintegration damage. That's Bastion's intended long fight loop. Moving on to the SIG ability, now the offensive and defensive ability accuracy reduction for energy damaging effects is expanded to affect non-personal effects. What this means is basically that now this works on hazard shift. So at SIG 1, you're no longer only turning off the opponent's energy effects. Now you can also turn off the shocks or incinerates or cold snaps from hazard shift fights, or from anything similar like energy adoption in Story Quest and so forth. Against mutants, whenever the opponent gains a regeneration or prowess effect, all of Bastion's personal abilities pause for 1.2 seconds. So you're not directly controlling regen or prowess, but your Furies, your disintegrations, your regens, your auto repairs, all of these get better against opponents with those effects. And then lastly, just a straight damage boost. The personal Fury on Bastion Special 2 gets up to 30% stronger. So moving on to Synergies, we have Need a Hand with Nightcrawler and Cable. For Bastion, while his personal Pursuit is active, whenever an evade fails to activate, he automatically inflicts virus charges and pauses the Pursuit, so you hold on to it and ramp. For Nightcrawler, max stacks of prowess is increased by 5, allowing you to get bigger special numbers, but also bigger instant bleeds, provided your Nightcrawler is duped. And then for Cable, personal regen buff ability accuracy is increased by 10% flat, so you're significantly more likely to get those regens. And whenever you get one, you also get a power efficiency passive for 14 seconds, allowing you to throw more specials and probably cross more bars of power, which is what is giving you your buffs in the first place. This is my family with Sentinel, Nimrod, and Omega Sentinel. Bastion's disintegration effects last 20% longer, so it's significantly easier to hold on to that big one from the special 3. You have to heavy less often. For Nimrod, while the opponent is suffering from a personal shock effect, Eradicate expires more slowly, meaning that especially if you're facing somebody with prowess or regen that you're removing off them and turning into a shock, you can get yourself more time to parry, build charges, and stay in Eradicate. For Sentinel, at max analysis charges, personal non-damaging debuffs expire more slowly during the opponent's specials. This is specifically going to be the heal block and the armor break if you were needing those. And then for Omega Sentinel, personal non-damaging debuff durations are increased by 2.5 seconds, which is going to make everything about the rest of her kit that much easier to navigate. You're more likely to refresh them, you're more likely to pause them, you're more likely to stay at max and get credit for your plasmas. Big boost. Players of the game with Penny Parker. Bastion's special attack infection abilities trigger even if infection is not active, but this can only trigger twice per match. So I would recommend not relying on this for the special one's extra disintegrations. This is basically to save you if you feel like you need to throw the special 2 and you don't have infection up, right? Boom, you get the second Fury, then you can get back into infection for the special 1 cash out. And then for Penny, the special 3 sets the sync shield strength to 200%. So it normally refills her, now it refills her even more. We have the Destiny Inside Me with Storm, Beast, Cable, Jean Grey, and Nightcrawler, a bunch of original X-Men. On Bastion's side, each defeated Synergy champion on the team grants 6% attack rating, and then for all mutant champions, not just those listed, each mutant champion on the team grants the rest of the mutants 4% attack rating. And then family with those same Sentinels, all champions gain 6% health, standard generic. So we already talked about how Collar Tech is super, super helpful here. I don't think I need to sell you on that. But we can also talk about how Bastion interacts with Liquid Courage and Double Edge. He's not going to take any damage from the bleed or the poison. He's going to gain those regen buffs at the start of the fight for having them on him. He is going to take recoil damage. So in a longer fight, still a bit of a problem. But if there's anything else in the fight that can give him those regens to top up, then that works fine, right? Because the poison that's on him for the entire time from Liquid Courage is not going to reduce his regen rate, and so you still get all of those self-repairs at full strength. And that is Bastion. Really cool spin on our existing robot champions, right? There are obvious nods here to Warlock, to Omega Sentinel, to Nimrod. Really cool stuff going on, powerful abilities. Great against Onslaught, but also helpful against Hazard Shift in general. Good at controlling the opponent's specials, good at doing a ton of damage. Parry non-contact up pretty much all the time, which is super helpful. Really powerful character and really fun to play with very sick animations. I chuckled there because they are a little cartoonish at times, but that's what we expect from a villain like this. Yeah, Bastion's a lot of fun. Let me know in the comments what you're thinking. Looking forward to the discussion. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and take care.